Ok, são 16 horas.
Estão entrando.
Estão entrando. E aí, podemos começar? 16 horas, aqui no Brasil.
2 minutos.
2 minutos.
A gente está esperando você, não? Não está ainda entrando, não? Não, estamos...
Ok. Já estamos?
Vamos esperar. Não, vamos... 1 minuto mais
Já
para
tá.
ele falar. As pessoas estão entrando, né?
É.
Ok. Nós também, ó, gente. Ok.
Ok.
Então, a gente começa agora?
Sim.
Você pode abrir a pantalla do... Conectar, compartilhar isso.
E tornar público, né?
Está compartilhando
Ok.
a imagem.
Ok. Já podemos então começar. Olá.
Ainda está falando.
Boa...
Não, espera. Ok, a gente começa então. Ok, Paulo, agora sim você pode comentar.
Olá, boa tarde, Brasil. Boa noite aí na Alemanha, na Europa. Grato à presença da Vivian, da Bárbara, da Clara. Esse é um evento para a gente fazer o lançamento de financiamento do livro da Vivian.
Já
Então, eu
começou.
queria agradecer a presença de todo mundo. Nós estamos fazendo hoje o lançamento de uma campanha de financiamento colaborativo para a gente publicar esse livro. Meu nome é Paulo César, eu sou facilitador de fórum e desde 2014 a Bárbara e a Ita, duas queridas, estão vindo ao Brasil ensinar para a gente uma metodologia chamada Fórum Zeg, que Bárbara vai falar daqui a pouco. E essa metodologia tem na base do livro da Vivian muitos conhecimentos. E daí porque a gente está fazendo esse esforço para publicar no Brasil o livro da Vivian, que é o livro Emoções e Sentimentos. Então, eu queria muito agradecer a todos que estão aqui. Nessa live tem muitos facilitadores de fórum, facilitadores de Dragon Dreaming, de comunicação não violenta. Esse livro eu acho que vai ser muito importante para nós que trabalhamos com pessoas, com as emoções, né? E queria agradecer também a Bambual Editora, que é a parceira nesse projeto. A Bambual, ela sempre está trazendo livros em português que trabalham esses conceitos da grande virada, né, da construção de uma nova humanidade. Então, eu queria agradecer muito a presença de todos e eu gostaria, então, de passar agora a palavra para a Bárbara, que vai falar um pouquinho para nós aí sobre o fórum e sobre todo esse movimento para a gente ter esse livro no Brasil. Bárbara, com você.
Bom, boa tarde a todos vocês. Gratidão, Paulo. Sim, eu venho aqui da Alemanha, estou falando da Alemanha, da minha ecovila. Moramos aqui com 100 pessoas, já há quase 30 anos. E vocês podem imaginar que isso é uma situação onde as emoções têm muita importância. Os conflitos, as emoções sempre estão chegando. Então, a gente criou um processo de comunicação transparente, que se chama de fórum, como o Paulo já mencionou, que inclui as emoções. E é muito importante incluir realmente elas, porque são uma ponte para a outra pessoa, para as relações, para os relacionamentos, para a conexão entre as pessoas. Então, para nós, o trabalho o trabalho de Vivian, de conhecer essa bússola, a maneira, a saber dela, contribui muito a fazer mais preciso esse trabalho das emoções. E realmente, através desse livro, através dela, através da aprendizagem dela, eu realmente compreendi mais que as minhas emoções são os meus amigos, que são os amigos para nos conectar todos. Então, estou muito feliz que esse saber também chega no Brasil com o livro da Vivian, que temos a tradução do livro agora, que vocês já, a partir de agora, vocês podem comprar e que agora vamos apresentar, que ela pode falar um pouquinho mais desse trabalho que tem. Então, vou passar para ela. E vocês vão ouvir a minha tradução.
Thank you so much, Paulo and Barbara, for this introduction, and Isabel. This is a very exciting moment. And it's a very exciting moment because the book is about to be released in another language. And it's a very exciting moment to be talking about feelings because we, as humanity, are currently confronted with a lot of feelings and emotions. And we are very much challenged to deal with feelings and emotions in a new way. So I'm very grateful that the book will be available to more people, because I know it's helped tens of thousands of readers to navigate their feelings and emotions with more clarity and maturity. So let me talk a little bit about where this work comes from. I'm personally a very sensitive and emotional creature. And in my own journey, I was really unhappy with the answers that I found in books I was reading, whether they were spiritual books or psychological books, scientific books, philosophical books. They didn't provide me with explanations about the nature of feelings that really helped me to befriend my feelings. They didn't answer very fundamental questions like, what are feelings really good for? Why do we have them? Why are they sometimes so challenging? And especially the feelings that are often considered negative, such as anger, sadness, fear, shame. What are those good for? Is it really just about not having them? That didn't make sense to me. So I started on a very deep personal investigation into the nature of feelings, and over time started to share my discoveries with other people, and eventually wrote a book about it 13 years ago. And it turns out that what I mapped out was very useful for a lot of people. So it's a map of your emotions and feelings. And it's a map that comes from direct inquiry and experience. It's not a theoretical model. So my invitation to you as I take you through the model or introduce you a little bit into the model is to not only listen with your mind, but to listen with your whole body. And to see if you can connect what I'm saying to your own experience. So the first thing I noticed when I started to inquire into the nature of feelings, I noticed that our language is very confusing when it comes to feelings. And this reflects, of course, our confusion about feelings. So I noticed that we will say feeling and we might mean intuition, we might mean a mood, we might mean a physical sensation. We could mean all sorts of things. So the first thing I did when I started to inquire into feelings was to come up with different categories to distinguish different phenomena. And I came up with 5 different categories of sensations. And I just want to take you through them to be more clear what we're talking about when we say feelings. So the first category is pretty obvious. It's the physical sensations. So what you feel with your physical body, touch, temperature, or the 5 senses. The second category is what I call biological programs. And these are our instincts. And this is where we have biological fear or biological anger. So your fight or flight reactions, but also sensations such as hunger, thirst, the sexual drive, disgust. These are all instinctual reactions that come from our animal past. And they can be very fast and very powerful. And they do not go through the conscious mind. They don't go through reflection. So it's something that happens to you. And then afterwards, you can reflect on what startled you or what happened. So that's the second category. The third evolved a bit later. So this is really an evolution of feelings also. The third category evolved when we as human beings started to live in more complex social structures, so in groups. And in groups, it became very important to be able to regulate feelings. So what this means is that we started to develop the ability to reflect on what was happening and then have feelings accordingly. For example, we might be confronting a certain situation. One of my favorite examples is you come home and you notice that your partner hasn't done the dishes. So the kitchen is completely dirty, even though it was his turn to do it. And you might, reflect on that and say, wait a minute, this is wrong. Like we had an agreement and this is wrong. And this interpretation produces a feeling we call anger. And depending on the interpretation that you make of the situation, you produce different feelings. And this is a process that is more deliberate, so it's more reflected, and it's also much slower than your instinctual reaction. And we'll talk more about that later. So this is actually the part where this is what I call feelings. Feelings as social powers, because they help us to relate. And they're actually supposed to help us have good relationships. And in their healthy form, that's exactly what they do. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I distinguish in this third category of feelings as social powers, I distinguish 5 basic feelings. Together, they form the emotional compass. And we will look into that in more detail. But first, I want to go through the 5 categories of sensations. So we had physical sensations, biological programs, feelings as social powers. And the 4th category is what I call emotions. And the emotions, the way I use the term in English, refers to feelings that we didn't feel at the time that we had them. So they're feelings from the past, very often from childhood. And they form our emotional backpack, our emotional baggage. And these emotions can really give us a hard time. The emotions are really irrational and impractical. So while feelings as social powers, the 3rd category, can really help us in our relationships, emotions is the stuff that really makes it difficult. Because emotions is the moment like you become triggered. Something pushes a button, and from one moment to the next, you are very emotional. You're in a drama, or more common in Germany, you don't go into a drama, but you go completely numb. You stop feeling anything at all. And whether you go into a drama or whether you stop feeling, both are not healthy emotional states. Okay, so that's the 4th category. And I'm hoping that after we talk about the emotional compass, we'll be able to talk about the emotions a little bit more in detail, because it's very important to learn how to deal with our emotions. And then we have a 5th and final category. And this is our next evolutionary stage. And this 5th category is what I call the states of consciousness or abilities. Now, states of consciousness or abilities is, for example, the ability to love or to truly trust. And those I call abilities because we are not born with them. We are born with the potential to learn true love and to learn true trust. but it doesn't come automatically at this evolutionary stage. So what that means is that it's something we can develop if we work on it. And that's why it's an ability. And it's also a state of consciousness, because even if you have developed the ability to love or to trust, you're not always in that state of consciousness. So when you're having a good day, you might be very loving and very open, and you can accept everything about your child or your partner or your boss. And you can just love them the way they are. And then something happens, something triggers you, something triggers an emotion from the past, and you fall out of that state. You fall out of the state of love or out of the state of trust. So these are the 5 categories where I make distinctions. And in my experience, it's very important to distinguish these different phenomena, because they help us to deal with each phenomenon appropriately. And when we confuse them, we create a lot of confusion in our systems. So for example, maybe I have an awareness that being angry can sometimes be healthy. It can help me to be clear about what I want. It can help me to set boundaries. Yet, when I confuse that with an emotion that comes from my past, I can really produce very unhealthy anger. I can become very disrespectful. I can really hurt someone I love. I can even become violent. And if I confuse the 2 phenomenon, I might think that I'm just expressing healthy anger, but I'm not. I'm actually throwing emotional garbage on the other person. Okay, so like I said, first I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the 5 basic feelings that together form the emotional compass. So this is like category 3, the feelings as social powers. That's what we're talking about first. Because in my experience, giving people this map and this basic understanding of what feelings are really good for, especially the challenging feelings like anger, sadness, shame, fear, really helps them to befriend these feelings. So the emotional compass is a map where we have, like in a compass with the 4 directions, we have 4 feelings that help us to relate to other people. And these 4 feelings are anger, sadness, fear, and joy. And then we have a 5th feeling, which is in the middle of the compass. And that feeling is about relating to ourselves. And this feeling is shame. So I'm going to go through the 5 basic feelings in the emotional compass and talk about the powerful, healthy aspect of each and the shadow aspect. Because each of these feelings has a mature, beautiful, healthy expression. And each of these feelings also has an unhealthy shadow expression. And my invitation to you is to check with yourself, which of these feelings are you familiar with? Are you comfortable with? Which of these feelings do you know in their healthy, beautiful, powerful expression? And which of these feelings do you only know in their shadow expression? So let's start with anger. I already mentioned that anger is a feeling that is created through the interpretation that something is wrong. And this interpretation can produce a healthy anger, which can enable me to change something about the situation. So the nature of anger is fire. It gives me a lot of energy. My hands go up and I'm ready to do something. And this doing something could be, to pick up on my example earlier, it could be cleaning the kitchen. Yeah, that could be one good use of my anger power. It could also mean talking to my partner in a way that is clear yet respectful. Now, what's important to understand about a healthy anger power and about all the feelings in their healthy expression is that it's always appropriate to the situation. So what that means is that I don't throw a temper tantrum because my partner didn't do the dishes. I don't produce excess anger. It's not a drama. I produce just enough anger to take care of the situation, not more and not less. So what that means is that the healthy anger will be used up in taking care of the situation. And afterwards, I'm done. There's nothing left in me from that anger because it's done. The energy was used to address the situation. And that's the purpose of it. Now, many people will only know anger in its unhealthy shadow expression. And this unhealthy shadow expression shows up in a very destructive way. So this is where I throw a temper tantrum. I maybe throw the dirty dishes through the kitchen. I become disrespectful. I say things that are hurtful, things that I don't want to say. And this happens whenever we feel we are absolutely right about something. That's when we produce shadow feelings, just a small hint. There's a lot more to be said about that, and we can't go into that in this short webinar. So just to drop a hint about it. So anger can be very powerful, to be clear, to set boundaries, to take care of things, to do things, to get things done. And it can be very destructive if you end up on the shadow side of it. Now, anger is a very useful feeling if you're in a situation that you can actually do something about, like cleaning the kitchen. However, there are situations where you really can't do anything. And in those situations, anger is not the appropriate feeling. If you get angry in a situation you can't change, it's like an engine running hot and the energy can't go anywhere. So this is important to understand, and most people have never received this information, that anger is only appropriate for situations that you can actually do something about. And if you're in a situation that you can't do something about, for example, if a loved one died, you need a different feeling in your compass. And in that case, the feeling that you need is sadness. Now, of course, if someone killed the person that you love, or if it was an accident where someone was careless, you might be angry at that person because you might seek justice. That's a different thing. But to address the death of a loved one, you need sadness. Or to address anything that is different than you would like it to be, but you can't change it. Now, sadness is kind of the opposite of anger. Remember, I said with anger, your hands go up and you have a lot of energy, you have like a rush of energy. With sadness, your hands drop and your whole energy calms down. And the nature of sadness, it's like water. And like water, it allows you to let go, and it allows you to find peace with that which is in its healthy, mature expression. That's the purpose of sadness. And if you really go into sadness, it allows you to accept, find peace, and it even opens your heart to what is, to embrace what is. Now, of course, also sadness has a negative, shadow, unhealthy expression. And that's where we go into an immature resignation of, we don't want it to be like this. And we're kind of in an immature grudge against life. And we disconnect from what is. That's the great difference. With a healthy sadness, you connect with what is. With an unhealthy sadness, you disconnect from what is because you just don't want it to be like that. And that's where we can really spiral into very unhealthy places with an unhealthy sadness, with a shadow sadness. So anger is great if there's something you can actually do about a situation. Sadness is great if it's about accepting what is. Yet there are situations in life that we can neither change nor simply accept. And for many people, the pandemic that we're currently living through is such a situation. We feel powerless. We feel we can't do anything about it. Like we personally, as little humans sitting in Germany or in Brazil. Yet we can't also just accept it. Because if we just accept what is happening, we might end up in situations that are really, really bad. And those are situations where we need another feeling in the compass, and that's fear. And fear is a feeling that has been so predominant since the beginning of this pandemic in the collective field. That's my perception. And in many ways, we've experienced a lot of the shadow of fear, where people go either into panic or into paralysis. And I've really invited people from the beginning of the pandemic to connect with the power of fear. Now, what's the power of fear? Many people are not aware that fear could have a healthy, positive expression. So one thing we need to be clear about is that, contrary to common belief, fear does not just show up when we are confronted with danger. That's what we commonly think. The purpose of fear is to warn us of danger. But actually, that would be way too dangerous if fear would only show up the moment that you're actually confronting danger. So what really happens is that fear shows up the moment we meet the unknown. Whenever you're confronted in your life with uncertainty and the unknown, a completely healthy, normal, and natural reaction is fear. And again, very similar to what I explained about sadness. If you are in the healthy, powerful expression of fear, the fear will help you connect with the unknown and to meet the unknown. And what this power of fear does is it makes you very alert, very awake, wide awake. And in this state, we are so present. We are capable of doing things and knowing things that we are not capable of doing and knowing without this power of fear. So it's a magical force, actually. And when we are connected with the power of fear, in this presence, in this alertness, it allows us to connect with the unknown, to meet with the unknown. And very often it allows us to pass over this threshold that separates the known from the unknown. And we all know that this threshold is a very scary place and a very exciting place. And beyond that threshold, there could be great danger. Yes, could be. That's why we're afraid. but there could also be enormous opportunity. And this is very much what we're experiencing right now. We're confronted with a situation that could mean great danger. And we're also confronted with a situation that could mean enormous opportunity. And there I'm talking about the collective, but I'm also talking about the individual. So I've talked about anger, which helps us to change what we can change. Sadness, which helps us to accept that which we cannot change, but we would like it to be different. Fear, to address, to meet that which we can neither change nor accept. Now that brings me to the fourth feeling in the compass. Remember I said there's 4 feelings that help us relate. The fourth feeling is everyone's favorite feeling, and that's joy. Now, I don't know about you, but many people, when they first hear about the compass, they don't like it. Because how can you have a model with 5 basic feelings, 4 of which you don't really want to have? And most people try to maximize the amount of joy they have in their life and minimize all the other feelings. And very often they're not even very interested in distinguishing whether it's anger or sadness or fear or shame. You just don't want to have them. Now, that's very natural and understandable, and we have very good reasons for that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But first, I want to address, why do we have 4 so-called negative feelings and only 1 positive? When we look at it objectively, we see that the 4 so-called negative feelings all show up when there is a gap between what we would like and what is. When these 2 don't match, when there is a gap, we experience pain, we experience problems, we experience challenges, we experience difficulty. So this situation where what you would like doesn't match what is much more challenging than the situation when what you would like and what is match. Okay? So the situation when life is the way you would like it to be, the sun is shining, your woman loves you, it's a beautiful day, the children are happy, you're successful in your job, everything's wonderful. Those are not the really challenging situations in life, right? And that's why in the compass, we have like 1 feeling to address those beautiful moments, which is joy. And we have 4 different feelings to address the situation of a mismatch between what you would like and what is. Because those situations are much more challenging and we need different tools to address them. So one way to think about the 5 basic feelings is to think of them as tools. And depending on the kind of gap that you're experiencing, you need a different tool to address the gap. Or another image I like to use is that it's like a bridge between what is and what you would like. Your feelings are like bridges. Okay, so back to joy. So the reason why we all love joy so much is because joy comes up naturally whenever life is the way we would like it to be. So actually, it's a very innocent, childlike, we could also say immature attitude, because it's kind of a part of us that would like to have birthday every day. But as adults, we know that, life is not like that. Sometimes life is the way you want it to be. and sometimes not. And that's why all our feelings are important. But let's look at joy. Many people are surprised to learn that joy also has a shadow expression. Like we all know, joy is beautiful, light, healthy. It makes you glow. It makes you attractive. It makes you charismatic. When you are full of joy, people are naturally drawn to you, and it gives you a natural authority, and it allows you to really celebrate life, celebrate this moment, appreciate what you have, appreciate when life is just full of wonderful things, wonderful people, wonderful moments. So that's the light aspect of joy. The shadow aspect of joy is, I call it illusion. And this is where we pretend everything is wonderful when really it isn't. So we deny that there is a gap between what is and what we would like. And this is quite common in spiritual circles. It's quite common with people who go very deeply into positive thinking. And positive thinking is great, but it's not great when you start to lie to yourself and to others. And that's where we end up in the illusion, the shadow expression of joy. And it's not only in the spiritual that it's common. It's actually very common everywhere. Everywhere people pretend to themselves, pretend that they have a great marriage, pretend that they have a great relationship with their children, pretend, like now in the pandemic, that everything is fine, that we don't have a problem, for example. So that's the shadow expression of joy. And it really prevents us from addressing a situation with one of the other feelings that might be more appropriate to the situation, like anger, like sadness, like fear. Okay, so let's look at the fifth feeling. Like I mentioned, this feeling is located in the center of the compass because it's about relating to ourselves. And I find it quite significant that in the Bible, the feeling of shame is the first feeling that is mentioned the moment Adam and Eve ate from the fruit from the tree of knowledge. And it said, like, they looked at themselves and they felt shame. So it's very closely linked to a very significant step in our consciousness, where we started to become aware of ourselves. So we're not only relating to other people, suddenly we are relating to ourselves. And that's what shame is really about. And shame, many people know shame only as something destructive, only in its shadow expression. And of course, it has a shadow expression like all other feelings. And in this shadow expression, we go into really unloving ways of relating to ourselves. We really criticize ourselves very harshly, and we put ourselves down. That's basically what it comes down to. We put ourselves down, like going to self-abasement. And many people are not aware that actually shame also has a very, very healthy aspect, and we really need it. Without shame, we're not able to function socially. We're not able to navigate social situations. So the healthy aspect of shame is self-reflection. Looking at ourselves, questioning ourselves in a loving way. Checking in with ourselves. Is this who I want to be? Is this in tune with my values? Is my behavior appropriate to this situation? To name a few examples. So shame is really this moment where our attention turns towards ourselves. We become aware of our existence. Very starkly, we become aware of it. And we start to perceive ourselves very clearly. And through that, we can begin to relate to ourselves. And what that means is that once our attention has turned towards ourselves, we can begin to relate to ourselves with all the other feelings. We can be angry with ourselves. Sometimes it's appropriate to be angry with ourselves. Sometimes we need to give ourselves a push. Say, okay, I know I need to exercise. Come on, go do it. Yeah, this can be a very healthy anger. Or to find the discipline for a daily yoga practice or a daily meditation practice or something you just need to make yourself do. For this, a healthy anger towards myself can be very good. Or a healthy sadness. I can accept parts of me that I would so like to be different, but I can't change them. Maybe I've tried to change them for 20 years, and it's time to just accept that this is how I am. Yeah, this can be another way of relating to myself with sadness, for example. And there can be moments, of course, of great joy, looking at myself and just thinking it's wonderful that I'm here and appreciating that. And there can be moments of looking at myself and being afraid of what I see, meeting aspects of my shadow, of my personality that I don't know how to be with. Yeah. So actually the shame is like the element of ether where it contains all the other elements. So I believe I didn't mention, I mentioned for anger the element of fire, for sadness the element of water, and for fear I associate the element of earth because it's about boundaries and limitations. And for joy, I associate the element of air, lightness. And then the fifth feeling is the fifth element is ether, which contains the other elements and the other feelings as well. So this is the emotional compass. This is the map that I offer to you to help you navigate your emotions with more precision and clarity. And before I talk a little bit more briefly about distinguishing feelings and emotions, which is the other very important piece in this whole puzzle, I want to give you one last hint for yourself in working with this compass. Now, if you understand the compass properly, you understand that we need all 5 feelings in order to be able to relate appropriately to whatever situation we confront. Many people, because of childhood conditioning or how our society and culture is, don't have access to all 5 feelings. Many people have difficulty with certain feelings, either because they don't have that feeling. It's like it's missing in their compass. Like they can't be angry, or they can't be sad, or they can't be afraid, or they can't feel shame, or they can't feel joy. Or they only know certain feelings in their shadow expression. It's very rare these days to have someone who has all 5 feelings fully available in a healthy form. We need to work on that. But what happens is that if one of your feelings is missing or only available to you in an unhealthy form, you start to compensate for that feeling with other feelings. So for example, if you can't be angry, but you're in a situation where you would need to be angry, you would need to do something about the situation, you might instead go into shame. So you might look for the fault in yourself. And so somebody maybe, you know, you walk down the street and somebody just offends you for no reason, you know, instead of just saying, hey, you know, stop with a healthy boundary, you turn in and you're like, oh, what did I do wrong? Yeah. So you have a confusion between anger and shame. Or another example is very common when people are not able to be angry, that they start to cry in situations that they could actually do something about. So they become sad. And what happens then is very often people will think they have a problem with sadness or with shame because they experience so much sadness and they experience so much shame. And they experience these feelings as not useful in the situation. So they think they have a problem with those feelings. But what they really have a problem with is anger. So my invitation to you is to reflect for yourself, how is my emotional compass? How complete is my compass? What feelings are missing in your compass? And what other feelings might you be compensating them with? Now, there's all combinations, and in the book, I go into all combinations in great detail. So there's a lot to explore. And before we get back to the book, let me talk for a moment about discerning feelings and emotions. So remember in the beginning, I talked about the 5 categories of sensations, and 2 of those were feelings and emotions. And learning to distinguish these 2 is one of the key learnings right now for us as human beings. Now, as I said, feelings show up in the moment and they are appropriate to the situation, and they don't show up more or less than needed. So they're actually very practical. Emotions, however, are not. This is where something happens, something small often, and you notice that your emotional state goes completely out of balance. And you're no longer able to manage your emotions. That's what happens with our emotional baggage. And what's important is that we learn to recognize these situations and we learn to take responsibility for them. So we can start to recognize them by learning symptoms. So symptoms might be that you have a very high pulse, or you might start to sweat, or your thoughts are going crazy in your mind, or you have very, very, very strong emotions, or you feel nothing. Those are different symptoms of emotional activation, of being triggered. When you learn to recognize that, and you start to take responsibility for it in the moment, which is a big step, there's a huge shift in your relationships. Everything changes. You stop creating dramas. You stop blaming other people for your emotional state. You start to take charge and responsibility for your emotional baggage and your wounds. And what we need, what our emotions need, is they need to be felt. And they need to be felt with compassion. And very often, we cannot feel our emotions by ourselves. We need someone else to be there with us so that we can feel what we're feeling. This can be a good friend, this can be a therapist, this can be a coach, This can be people sitting in a forum. But we as human beings very often need each other to support each other, to feel overwhelming emotions, and through that, to heal them and to process them. Now, I know this sounds very simple, and in theory, it's very simple. In practice, it's usually the last thing people want to do. In my experience, we try everything so that we do not have to feel. We go into dramas, we create stories, we analyze, we blame, we disconnect, we develop addictions, we distract ourselves. Many, many different strategies that we develop so that we don't feel. And the invitation is to you to learn again to become present with what you are feeling in this moment, especially when it's challenging, maybe with the support of a friend, to become present and to really allow yourself to experience the sensation. And what you will see is that this in itself is healing. And in my experience, it's actually the only thing that's really healing for emotions, is to feel them. So that was my journey through the emotional compass. And obviously in the book, I'm able to go into much greater detail, especially around the subject of the shadow and the power of feelings, and how, if you find yourself stuck in the shadow expression of a feeling, can you move into the healthy expression? That's a very fascinating mechanism that I go into very deeply in the book. And the book is also full of exercises. So it's very much about an experiential journey that you can practice on your own, you can practice with friends, you can practice in group settings, you can practice with clients. Really great to help you to develop your emotional intelligence, to develop your understanding of your emotions and feelings on an experiential level. So now I want to give a big, huge thank you to Barbara. You're my heroine. It's amazing how you managed this. I'm so impressed. I want to give a big, big thank you to Isabel, Paolo, and to everyone else who made it possible that we are here today, and especially that we have this book now in Portuguese. I'm so grateful. I'm so excited. And I want to pass the word back to Paolo for closing words, full of gratitude.
Uau, muito gratidão, Vivian, por essa aula sobre a bússola das emoções. Nós, brasileiros, estamos muito precisando aprender a lidar com as nossas,
a gente tem um delay, né, da imagem com o som. Então,
as nossas emoções.
Ou vai entrar aqui falando e a gente ouve ele.
Então, eu queria agradecer, Vivian, gratidão pela sua exposição, foi muito linda, maravilhosa. É um material precioso para todos nós que estamos trabalhando com as emoções. E queria convidar as pessoas a adquirirem o livro. Nós estamos fazendo o lançamento da campanha para que a gente possa adquirir o livro. Então, queria convidar todas as pessoas aqui a compartilharem, a adquirirem. O link está aqui embaixo, da editora Bambual, para a gente começar a fazer essa campanha para a gente viabilizar esse livro em português. Bárbara, com você.
Bom, só agradecer a Vivian para a sua presença e para todo essa ajuda que ela fez com o seu trabalho sobre as emoções, os outros trabalhos que ela tem também. Porque muito grata de poder aprender sempre mais. E espero que muitas pessoas possam aproveitar dessas coisas. Gratidão.
Ok, gente, gratidão e até o nosso próximo encontro, né? Adquire o livro aqui no link, vamos fazer essa campanha para que a gente possa ter o livro da Vivian em português aqui no Brasil. Beijão para todo mundo.